Before we get into today's edition of Just the Truth, let me tell you about the latest special from Michael and Dale at MyPillow. The standard MyPillow, normally $49.98 for a limited time only, just $14.88 with promo code Joey. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener specials, and see all the specials. There's a limited quantity of just 10 at this special price. That's $14.88 with promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studio. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. A shocking new report shows the Department of Health and Human Services shelled out more than $22 billion on grants for migrants, including, you ready for this? Cash for cars, home loans, and startups for businesses. You're going to want to hear this, but warning, it's going to make your blood pressure boil. A series of new polls have been released in recent days showing how Americans grade President Trump in his first 3 weeks in office. And President Trump signed an executive order yesterday establishing the Make America Healthy Again Commission, which will be led by newly confirmed Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. When automaker Scout Motors assembly plant in Blythewood, South Carolina is fully operational, an estimated 200,000 electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles will be built there each year. But if you live in South Carolina, you're going to need to travel to another state to purchase one. A group of South Carolina legislators is trying to change that. We have an update on legislation that could affect your locally owned family dealership. And Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette will join us a little bit later in the show today as well. There's a lot to cover today, so let's get started.
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
I wanted to name it the Joey Hudson bill, but, they don't allow you to put names on bills. But I wanted to call it the Joey Hudson bill because I know that one's been near and dear to you for a number of years.
That's how it's done. Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
The Department of Health and Human Services ramped up grants for migrants between 2020 and 2024, which included cash assistance to buy cars, homes, and even build credit for startup businesses, according to a shocking watchdog report that found taxpayers were left on the hook for over $22 billion. Now, think about this. You notice I said during the period of 2020 and 2024. Who was president then? Who was vice president then? The Biden administration. This latest information just simply proves that that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris wanted to recklessly spend our tax dollars to help these people coming into our country. It was like a magnet of people, and they wonder why so many people came across both our southern border and northern border. HHS's Office of Refugee Resettlement is known as ORR, which came under fire last year for having lost track of about 32,000 migrant kids in the U.S. You remember that? They handed out the high sum of billions to a host of nonprofits, again, effectively acting as a giant magnet for those crossing the U.S. border and claiming asylum. Auditors from the Money Monitor opened the books revealed exclusively to the New York Post yesterday. They were tasked with settling migrants, asylum seekers, and other refugees in America. ORR drastically increased the number of non-citizens eligible to receive funding over the bulk of President Joe Biden's term, with more than $10 billion shelled out to grant-receiving organizations in fiscal year 2023 alone. That coincided, of course, with the all-time records being set for southern border crossings into the U.S. with 2.4 million apprehensions by Customs and Border Protection over the same period. Well, no wonder we had record numbers. When the New York Times called it a giant magnet, that's exactly what it was. Word spread very quickly across Mexico. All those southern, across the southern hemisphere, that, hey, you go to America, they're going to help you out. They're going to give you some money. Don't worry about a thing. Just if you can get across the border, there's people up there who's going to give you money to help you start a business. They're going to give you money for travel. They're going to give you money for a house. They're going to help feed you. Non-governmental groups literally bilked taxpayers for up to $1.7 billion in services, including dollar-for-dollar matching savings plans for cars, homes, college educations, and startups. Small business loans of up to $15,000 were included. loans to repair credit history of up to $1,500. So, hey, they have bad credit when they got here. We're going to help them repair their credit history. We're going to give them $1,500. They were given money for cultural orientation, for emergency housing support, legal assistance, and Medicaid care. Some programs were only available to migrants or refugees who had been living in the U.S. for several years, who were employed or who were making around double the federal poverty level or less, among other stipulations. That wasn't always the case. The most funding, however, was spent on unaccompanied migrant children, with $12.4 billion obligated over the 5 years, even as federal whistleblowers were calling out ORR for placing many of the 291,000 kids in their care with unvetted and at times abusive sponsors. They just wanted to get these kids into a home somewhere. They didn't really know where they were putting them. And we've heard some of the stories of abuse. Open the Book CEO John Hart did an exclusive interview with the New York Post. He said the shining city on a hill with its walls and doors makes room for legal immigrants and legitimate refugees and asylum seekers, but the ORR has made a mockery of that vision in recent years. He said ORR is part of a troubling trend of using nonprofit groups as ideological proxies. Vast sums are being outsourced to evade accountability and prop up an immoral, exploitative system that is hurtful to both American citizens and people in other countries who are longing for a better life. Yesterday's report comes after the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, came under fire for sending around $80 million that has subsequently been clawed back by the Trump administration after Trump and his cabinet found out about it. This was to put migrants up in New York City hotels and to provide other services, meals, room service. More than $2.6 billion went out the door in fiscal year 2020, $2.3 billion in 2021, $3.3 billion in fiscal year 2022, and $10 billion in 2023. $4.2 billion in 2024. So with the exception of 2023, when they had that huge spike to $10 billion, starting in 2020, the amount went up every single year. Migrants from Cuba, Haiti, humanitarian parolees from Afghanistan and Ukraine, special immigrant visa holders from Afghanistan and Iraq, and unaccompanied minors, lots of, from abroad, were all eligible for grant programs. The watchdog group pointed out that the windfall came as ORR was expanding access to legal counsel for migrants and eliminating the need for other non-citizens like refugees to become economically self-sufficient as quickly as possible. So in other words, we're going to keep giving you this money. Don't worry about getting a job. Don't worry about becoming self-sufficient. Two of the top groups that received money in the last 4 fiscal years were Church World Services, which opposed a joint agreement between Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau closing an asylum loophole on the northern border. Of course, they didn't want it closed because they wanted more people coming in. And the International Rescue Committee. Now, let's dig in a little deeper here. Since 2020, the International Rescue Committee netted $355 million in grants, while the Church World Services received $598 million, according to the Open the Books. Robin Dunn Marcos, remember that name, Robin Dunn Marcos, the senior HHS official who oversaw ORR during that period, had previously worked for more than 30 years for both of these nonprofits. Do you follow me? Two of these nonprofits that combined received almost $1 billion. Robin Dunn Marcos, who was then working for the Biden administration and HHS, had worked for both of those but for a combined 30 years. In June 2023, Dunn Marcos testified to House lawmakers that her office was not even conducting criminal background checks on juveniles as part of the program that let in hundreds of thousands of migrant kids and became among the most costly for ORR. Then HHS Secretary, who was Xavier Becerra at the time, pushed his staff to release migrant children to sponsors as quickly as possible, likening the ideal turnover rate to an assembly line, according to the New York Times. Hart slammed OR's treatment of migrant kids and said it had revealed the left's counterfeit compassion around immigration. He said losing track of 300,000 children violates their dignity and puts them at risk. 300,000 kids, and they don't know where they are. In its report, Open the Books claimed that Dunn Marcos, that her past work for nonprofits receiving OR grants posed a conflict of interest. You think? You think she has a conflict of interest to two nonprofits that she had worked for a combined 30 years? Suddenly she's in the Department of HHS with a checkbook in her hand of your money and my money? Certainly it is a conflict of interest. Representatives for Dunn Marcos' office said in a statement that after being appointed in September 2022, she had recused herself from approving funding for any past employer. Sure, emails to her have gone unanswered. Actually, they bounced back, indicating that she left Dodge as soon as Donald Trump was sworn in as the 47th president. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Furman Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Furman Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you can trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Furman Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Furman Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Furman Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Furman Ford online at furmanford.com, furmanford.com. Faye writes, Joey, Omar and her buddies, in my opinion, were gag gifts from Obama. I will always believe he installed them to be like the eternal flame. They are to cause us trouble, as they will never be voted out as long as Obama is alive. Reparations is nonsense, but it will be used to stir up trouble. God bless America and keep us safe from the insane running loose in our own government. Thank you, Faye. Appreciate your text. Texter says, enjoy your podcast. Well, thank you. Appreciate you listening. So we need to understand that 30 to 40 years ago, state leadership decided to let mental ill citizens out of hospitals. Many end up homeless or activists. These LGBTQ people have mental illness or have been given over by God to their sins. They cannot figure their own birth sex and end up wanting their own city. They had this at one time. It was called Sodom and Gomorrah. President Donald Trump signed an executive order yesterday establishing the Make America Healthy Again Commission, which will be led by newly confirmed Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Yesterday, of course, RFK Jr. was given the final go-ahead in a close vote, but just enough. Mitch McConnell voted against him. I don't know why I'm surprised about that, but why would you be a sitting Republican senator and you vote against the leader of your party, the president of the United States, is one of his nominees? You expect that from Democrats, but not from Republicans. It's time for people like Mitch McConnell to move on. Go to the House, retire. Now, this commission, chaired by Kennedy, will be tasked with investigating and addressing the root causes of America's escalating health crisis, with an initial focus on childhood chronic disease, the White House explained to the media in a news release. It kind of concerns me anytime they use the word or the term root causes. Every time I hear the term root causes, I don't know that I ever heard of that until Kamala Harris used it in explaining how she was addressing the southern border. Remember that? I digress. Kennedy was confirmed yesterday as the nation's leader of the U.S. Health and Human Services. His new commission will work to restore trust in medical and scientific institutions and hold public hearings, meetings, and roundtables to receive input from health leaders, according to the White House. The commission will focus on 4 policy directives to reverse chronic disease, including providing Americans transparency on health data to avoid conflicts of interest in all federally funded health research. He will work to prioritize gold standard research on why Americans are getting sick in all federally funded health research. He will work with farmers to ensure food is healthy as well as affordable, and expanding health coverage and treatment options for beneficial lifestyle changes and disease prevention. That's how the commission was described after President Trump signed the executive order creating it yesterday. The commission will initially focus on childhood chronic diseases like autism, fatty liver disease, and will also investigate adult chronic diseases like asthma and the U.S. average life expectancy compared to other nations. But Mr. Kennedy was expected to get to work quickly yesterday. President Trump also took to social media yesterday to showcase his frenetic pace since re-entering the White House on January the 20th. He posted 3 great weeks, perhaps the best ever. Trump has signed 64 executive orders since his inauguration. That surpasses the rate of any presidential predecessor during their first weeks in office. White House, while Trump is never shy about advertising his accomplishments, of course, new polling shows that Americans are divided on the job he is doing so far in his second administration. Now, this is a combination of various polls. This average, which was this particular one was conducted by AARP, has Trump at 48% approval rating, 47% disapproval rating. Now that conflicts with the recent CBS poll, which showed Trump with about a 53% approval rating. Some surveys, like Pew Research, show that Trump's approval ratings are slightly underwater, while others, like the CBS News, YouGov, say that the president's ratings are in very positive territory. You do an average, he's still in positive territory. His poll position among Americans is in stark contrast, though, if you compare it to his first term in office, when Trump pretty much entered office underwater. He never really gained a positive outlook in that entire 4 years. Veteran Republican pollster Neil Newhouse told Fox News his approval rating is higher than it was at any point in time during his first term. Newhouse, pointing to the president's pace since returning to power, noted that Americans are giving him positive marks right now based not just on the perception of what he's doing, but what he has done already. And boy, has he done a lot in these 3 weeks. A lot of the focus, of course, has been on what Doge is doing and the billions of dollars that Elon Musk and his team have uncovered, because, that gives us hope that maybe Donald Trump is going to actually revamp our federal government, that he's going to dig into where our tax dollars are going, and that he's not going to just talk about it, but he's actually doing it, and he's already done it. He's already saved more money than Joe Biden would have ever even considered doing in the 4 years in office. Now, back to the surveys. The AARP poll shows that Trump holds a net approval of 83 points with Republicans, but a net disapproval of 76 points among Democrats, and that he's underwater by 19 points among independent voters. Well, there's nothing new about that. We know Democrats don't like him. That's no surprise. Now, the interesting thing, when the AARP released their polls, and I've never thought of AARP being a specialist in political polling. They compared Trump's initial ratings, approval ratings, with those of Joe Biden. According to AARP, Biden's approval rating hovered in the mid to low 50s during his 6 months, which is well ahead of what Trump is. However, when you look at Biden's ratings after about 6 months, when he had the disaster pull out of Afghanistan, when inflation started soaring, when migrants started coming into the U.S. at record numbers, that's when Biden's approval ratings went south, and they never recovered. Joe Biden was underwater for the rest of his presidency. We've talked quite a bit about the sweetheart deal that Scout Motors was able to wrestle out of the state of South Carolina in order to build an assembly plant in Blythewood, South Carolina, which is just outside of Columbia. When this plant is fully operational, it will produce about 200,000 electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles each year. But if a state law that is currently on the books stays in place, you as a South Carolinian, if you're listening to my voice right now and you live in South Carolina, you'll have to travel outside of the state to buy one. We've talked about this briefly before. Even after the state spent $1.3 billion in taxpayer dollars to lure this company in, South Carolinians will not be able to purchase the vehicle. Why? Because Scout Motors sells their vehicles directly. A sales model that's similar to Tesla. Rather than going through a network of dealerships, they will sell them directly. South Carolina does not allow direct sales for automobile manufacturers. To change the law, the company faces what is, by some saying, is an uphill battle because of opposition from the state's roughly 300 or so car dealerships. So here's the story. Scout construction workers showed up in their hard hats and their orange vest, safety vest, at a recent legislative hearing room to show their support of the automaker. After taking an hour of testimony from representatives of Scout and Tesla, auto dealers within the state, and a couple of members of the public, a House panel adjourned debate, not killing the bill outright, but putting it on ice, if you will, in its first public hearing. No action taken, which means until somebody on that committee brings it back up, it could sit there and it would die. Representative Mark Smith said, I think it's very clear a lot of work needs to be done on this before or by both sides. Representative Smith is a Republican from Daniel Island. He's the bill's main sponsor and chairman of the subcommittee that heard testimony this week. He said legislators are leaving it up to the two groups to work out a compromise that both can live with. Now, the two groups, of course, he's talking about are the manufacturers and the dealers, the car dealers. The legislation allows any electric vehicle maker that does not or has not had dealerships in the state in the past decade to sell directly to customers. So this would qualify Scout Motors to sell directly. Now, dealers argue that this undercuts their business. Scout said it gives customers the option to buy electric vehicle brands like Scout and Tesla and Rivian and Lucid that are not currently sold in South Carolina because of its direct sales laws. Representative Carl Anderson from Georgetown said he didn't think it was fair for Scout to receive state incentives and we're going to boot our dealers out. He makes a point. Representative Chris Wooten, a Republican from Lexington, suggested that the state was trading the 4,000 new jobs Scout has promised to bring to that area of the state for 18,000 jobs at auto dealerships around the state. But brands with existing dealerships like BMW, Volvo, Chevrolet, Ford, Cadillac, Hyundai, all your local brands will continue to sell through their franchise dealers, meaning no dealerships will be driven out of business. They just won't get any new business selling Scouts or other similar brands because, hey, they sell direct. So let's think about this for a minute. You have your local Ford dealership. My favorite, of course, is Ford in Lawrence. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman, family-owned, family-operated, have been for years and years. You can trust when you walk in that door that a Furman family member will be there to help you. Is it fair to them that a manufacturer that was given huge tax incentives to come to the state and they just sell directly to someone without a dealership, which in theory, I suppose, I don't know a whole lot about how pricing works in automobiles, but I would imagine that it's going to undercut prices of these car dealerships. Now, Furman Ford has been in that Lawrence area for years. They support the community. They provide jobs in that community. Scout doesn't. Tesla doesn't. So what's fair here? South Carolina is one of 19 states that have a total ban on direct sales. This is according to the Electrification Coalition. It's an electric vehicle advocacy group. 10 others only allow direct sales on a limited basis, kind of what I think Scout is asking for. Cody Thacker, Scout's vice president of growth, said in all states and all countries around the world where direct sales are permitted, franchise dealers continue to thrive. Well, why don't we, if that's the case, let's ask them. Let's ask the franchise dealers what they think. They were there this week. I don't think they were very supportive. According to the state newspaper, South Carolina dealers would rather see the state's law remain as is. I can imagine why. Mark White is a Volkswagen dealer in Greenville. He told House members he was excited when Scout Motors announced in 2023 it was coming to South Carolina. He'd been waiting for a truck option to offer to his customers, and he saw that opportunity with Scout's Terra. White said he emailed a Scout executive he knew that same day to tell the executive he had a plot of land along Interstate 85 where he was ready to build a dealership to sell Scout's vehicles when they start production in 2027. Scout, of course, is a Volkswagen subsidiary, which Mark White represents. He sells Volkswagens, sold a lot of Volkswagens over the years. They ultimately decided to go in a different direction, and that is to sell directly. The automaker plans to open 100 locations across the U.S. and Canada to sell and service the cars themselves, meaning they will not need Mark White, their local Volkswagen dealer in Greenville, to sell their vehicles. If allowed, in Blythewood, that could include a showroom and factory tours as well as an off-road driving course for people trying out the vehicles. That's what they want to do. They want to have their showroom and everything there at the manufacturing plant. So I guess in theory, you order a car online. If you want to see it, if you want to touch it, you go down to Blythewood and you see it, and I guess pick it up. Sims Floyd is head of the South Carolina Automobile Dealers Association. He said Scout knew or should have known the rules before they built here. And you would have thought that through the negotiations of the over $1 billion in tax incentives that they received from South Carolina, somewhere in that conversation, they had to have thought about the idea that, well, one minor detail here. If you're planning to sell direct, you can't do that here in South Carolina. Dealers already sell other vehicles that fall directly under the VW umbrella, like Porsche and Audi brands. Floyd said, I think they can certainly handle 2 more. There's not a problem here. This is a choice issue for VW. Car dealers also suggested Scout and other direct sales brands would not offer the same level of service as individual dealerships. I understand there was some testimony from some who own Tesla, for example, who complained that they had to go out of state to get their vehicle serviced. But look, when you purchase a vehicle, when you purchase a Tesla in South Carolina, you know that there is not a service center or a Tesla dealership in the entire state. You make that choice, right? Do we need to be changing the law for them and for Scout? I'll let you decide. Emails are welcome. Joey@joeyhudson.com. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, Joey@joeyhudson.com. On our guest line, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, my friend. I hope you've had a great week so far.
I have had a wonderful week. Thank you for asking. Let's just jump right in. It's been a busy week in South Carolina in the State House. Lots going on. Let's start with the South Carolina House this week. They passed the South Carolina Energy Act. Talk with us about this bill and why it's important.
Well, Joey, you and I have talked about this before. We tried to pass an energy bill last year. It died on the last day of session. We have to do something. This is not just a South Carolina problem. Under the Biden administration, they had horrible energy policies, really hurt businesses across the country. But here in South Carolina, 2 Christmases ago, we almost experienced a rolling blackout. Perfect storm, cloudy, cold, Christmas Day. Everybody's consuming a ton of electricity. So that's when we in South Carolina, the governor started Power SC to start having like a very in-depth conversation with our energy producers, with energy experts to say, okay, what are we going to do? So as you saw in the General Assembly, in the House, passing the energy bill, excuse me, Joey, they basically saying that we are putting all forms of energy on the table. We're going to look at nuclear. Now that President Trump is back in office and everybody realizes he's an energy-friendly administration, there's been a lot of activity around kind of resurrecting the OVC Sumner sites, people looking at the foundation of what is there, is it still usable, things like that. So we're seeing more of that. We want to make sure we're putting nuclear on the table, making sure we put natural gas on the table, and hydrogen. Hydrogen is an up and coming, still a little bit pricey in the energy world because they're perfecting it. But basically what we're saying is we're going to do everything, and we're going to cut, useless regulations that make it harder and more expensive, to be able to produce energy, transmit energy. And so I think they've done a great job. I'm excited to see what happens now. It always becomes a chess match when it goes over to the other body to see what they add on to it or take away from it. But the governor and I are very excited because the governor and I have been saying for 2 years, we have got to move forward with an energy plan because we have to keep energy reliable and affordable. If we don't, South Carolina will stop growing. And when you stop growing, that becomes a problem within your state. So we're anxiously waiting to see what that bill looks like.
Yeah. And energy is such an important part. I mean, a lot of people, they think about energy to just heat and cool their home, put gasoline in your car, but energy just affects so many different things. We've talked about many times in the past. Gasoline prices affects everything that we purchase because at some point that product is in the back of a truck, a vehicle. So, all right, you mentioned nuclear. Is there any chance that the VC Summer project could potentially be resurrected? I mean, you look at that, it was just a disaster. Billions of dollars in losses there. Any chance that there's hope for that?
There is chance that there's hope for that. I think we have a lot of outside companies coming in and looking at that foundation, doing some testing to figure out is it salvageable where it is, which saves the next person a lot of money, right? Because that foundation becomes critical. So there's some testing going on to see, hey, is this a good place to start? Would we have to take it all down? But when you have a president that is pro-business and pro-America, like President Trump is, you start getting people excited about spending money. Nobody wants to spend money if they think they're going to hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, because it adds the cost up on it, right? And then it becomes out of reach. So there is a chance. So this is good. This is all good stuff. But, just the fact that President Trump turned back on natural gas, made natural gas okay, turning on pipelines again, it becomes a game changer. I mean, when I was in Germany last year, Joey, I think you and I talked about this, when the Green Party took control in Germany and they did away with their nuclear, their GDP had a drop the first time in Germany's history. Because if you're not affordable and you're definitely not reliable, manufacturers cannot count on unreliable energy.
Yeah.
And they were leaving Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So we should learn from the lessons of other countries that have done this poorly and not follow in the same footsteps.
Yeah. Let's move on and change topics here. Tort reform. That's another very important issue here in South Carolina. We've seen a lot of small businesses close because of liability insurance, particularly in the restaurant bar industry. Where do we stand with tort reform, do you think?
So, it's going to be interesting to see, again, always interesting to see what happens when it gets out of one chamber into the next. This is what businesses have been asking for. I mean, over the last 2 years, the chamber, e-commerce, every business group has said, we have got to get some tort reform done. And let's face it, if South Carolina, just like anything, isn't competitive in a space, if insurance companies feel, whether you like insurance companies or you don't like insurance companies or you don't like the premiums you pay, less competition means higher pricing. So every time an insurance company leaves the state, it just makes it, a weaker environment where insurance companies can come in, or it's the high risk markets that come in, right? Because they don't like the risk. and prices go up for people. And, I've been hearing restaurants, the governor is saying it, me saying it this week, like, listen, we're not sure what it's going to look like, but something's got to be done because we're hearing the cries of business. So I'm glad to see it's moving forward. It's the first time a tort reform bill has ever moved forward. So I'm curious, Joey, again, just like with energy, it's interesting to see what happens when it crosses over to the next body.
Right. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evatt with me today. With the tort reform, this is something, and if you're listening today, contact your House of Representatives member, your state senator, and let them know that tort reform is important to you because this is something that again affects everybody, and particularly a lot of businesses who we've seen a lot of longtime businesses close over the last 2 years because they simply could not afford their liability insurance. I mean, I've heard stories of people who have been paying, let's say, $2,500 a year for liability insurance, and it went to $20,000 or $30,000. And it's really affecting a lot of people, and it's affecting the prices that we pay when we go sit down in the restaurant business. When we go to a restaurant and have a meal, it's affecting that price.
Absolutely. You always feel bad. I mean, Joey, I'm an accountant by trade. My business was helping other businesses grow businesses until I became lieutenant governor. And in the restaurant business, it's a hard business. It really is. You talk about waste. You talk about, things going out the back door. You talk about heavy price, when it came to food, like you were just saying, gas prices went up, food prices went up. Those things were organically going up. And then you add something on like insurance prices that is really out of your control.
Yep.
You're right. People sit down and look. It's very thin margins, and you start to just go, there is no way on paper this is going to work. And they end up closing their doors. And we've all experienced that. Someplace we'd like to eat that just said, I can't do it anymore. Or they stopped selling alcohol at all.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's really where the issue comes up. So
yep.
It becomes a real problem.
Yep. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evatt with me today. All right, so let's look towards the nation's capital. A lot happening in Washington, too. It's just been a busy week overall. Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence. A lot of good things happening.
I know. And you know what? Isn't it funny to all the naysayers that said President Trump hates women? And
yeah.
I mean, look at the stellar lineup. Like, I'm never one to say, oh my goodness, just do this because this person is a woman, or, I try to always go with what I believe is you put the best people in. But for all the people who said that he hated women and he didn't like strong women and blah, 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 you look at Pam Bondi yesterday, literally suing Governor Hochul and Letitia James for their sanctuary policies and what they're doing. I mean, Pam Bondi is one tough AG.
Yep.
And now you have Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I was at the White House last week. I happened to meet the press secretary. What an impressive young lady.
Yes.
I mean, she is just a rock star. I mean, you look at the people around him. I mean, you don't have to get too far away from Melania, resurrecting her Yes, program, really targeting young at-risk girls to say the world is yours. You can be anything you want to be. Look at these wonderful, strong women around him. I was super impressed that Tulsi Gabbard, I think they were predicting that was going to be his hardest nominee to get across the finish line. So happy they did.
Yep. It's been a good week for sure. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evatt, always a pleasure. We'll catch up again next week. Be safe.
Well, thank you, Joey. You have a great weekend. Do something nice for that lovely wife of yours. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day.
Oh, yes.
So happy Valentine's Day to everybody listening. I hope the person you love comes home with a great box of chocolate or something sweet for you.
Yep, and it's a double for us because our wedding anniversary was Monday, so our 29th, and so we got married just before Valentine's, and we celebrate Valentine's, so it's a big week in the Hudson household.
Well, Joey, I saw that picture. You guys look like babies. Oh my goodness! But you all look great, and I hope you get Peg a double great gift.
Yes,
there you go.
There you go. That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.